I don't think that people who are listening to this or now watching this on YouTube have an understanding of how fast things can move in the shipping container. Chris Cody, after a year off from the pandemic, sat down in a chair and just went, whoa, as soon as we started. Mike Ryan, the zombie of Mike Ryan, the return of Mike Ryan. He's a little broken and a little puffy. He has returned and he just sat in the chair. And Stugotz, after he was gone for 3 weeks, greeted him instead of, hey, welcome back or good morning with, do we have tennis action this morning? Mike Ryan sat in the chair, and the first thing he says, and this does not bode well for today and the tightrope and the general, all of it can be gone in a sentence. Whitty, can you explain to me how this live thing works? There was supposed to be some comfort in Mike returning to that rusty, chair. Yes. And he is hated when he's here. And when he leaves, you hate that he's gone. And now he is back, and we are happy that he is back. And I will make you hate him again by asking whether Dame is coming to the Heat and for 5 minutes of soccer talk, because evidently yesterday was a great soccer day.
Putting me in winning positions, Dan. Also, we're on Query.
We are?
Yes, we are.
Yeah. Minus 120.
I know. I like good value.
It's an oldie, but a goodie.
We've been there before, Mike.
Oh, man. Mornings with Query.
We did not talk enough yesterday about the availability of Damian Lillard because we love the transaction in basketball. It's often more interesting than the action. And unless you want to talk Pascal Siakam and the idea of Wiseman and the number 7 from Golden State. Golden State seems to be in as many of these conversations as the Heat are. Golden State, light years ahead of everybody, according to Joe Lacob a few years ago. They're in on all of these conversations, and Siakam evidently is unhappy in Toronto. And in that sport, you can turn your fortunes around with the disgruntled superstars. So it would appear that the three guys we're talking about, correct? The three guys who are available, unless you want Reggie Jackson, who's all of a sudden having the best contract year I've seen in the playoffs since Jerome James.
I mean, Stan was right on him, huh? I mean,
Reggie Jackson, he's on a league minimum contract though, right? This is not him at the end of that max contract that ended up getting Stan fired in Detroit. I think he's on a league minimum contract and he's making himself some money here. And Paul George, we'll get into this over the course of the show. He was great last night in a lot of different ways, but even Stugotz, when it was obvious that he was having one of those dominant games, there was one time he just went at 3 dudes. He just dribbled the ball at 3 dudes. He embarrassed Chris Paul. So there's plenty of basketball to talk about. But Damian Lillard, it's being reported by his guy, Chris Haynes, that he is unhappy with the idea of the whole way the coaching search went in Portland.
Just quickly on Reggie Jackson, after making $17+ million last year, he is now making just over $500,000. Oh, he's going to get paid. I mean, there is a sucker out there just waiting.
I don't know what the audience does or what we're supposed to do with Paul George's legacy changing from game to game. I mean, first of all, he's played more minutes. These numbers are a bit startling, Stugotz. You've seen that he's played more minutes than anyone in the playoffs by a ton, like 125 or 130 more minutes than the next closest guy. Let's see here. No, it's Paul George at 735 minutes. Trae Young is second at 568 minutes. They're playing every second day. He continues to score in rarefied air, right? The graphics last night are Kobe and LeBron, and you get to the finals when you score this way in the playoffs.
It was like a KD game. It was from last round. That's what it was. He was great last night.
I think it's the best game we've seen in the playoffs, which is saying something just because of how efficient he was. It was 41 points on 20 shots. I think it was the best scoring game we've seen in the playoffs, even understanding. I originally thought that it was 30 shots. I thought it was going to be 15 for 30 because I was in and out of the game. 15 for 20, 41 points on 20 shots. You can put it in it's the best game of his career, but it comes after he just missed a couple of free throws at the end of the game. The difference in that series right now, Stugotz, is him missing those free throws.
Right, but he's the reason they're in the series, too. So it's quite the roller coaster right now for Paul George and how we're kind of all absorbing this, right?
But isn't it dumb the way that we do it? Because one of those guys needs to lose either CP3 or Paul George is going to lose. And so that becomes a critics buffet because you can't lose if you've been questioning these guys. I don't think Chris Paul and Devin Booker, I don't think either of them are 100% healthy.
I think Paul George has already won, even if they lose. I think he's erased a lot of opinions that people had about him coming into the playoffs. I think he's erased some doubt with a lot of people. I think Chris Paul has the most to lose here. You can't be up 3-1 on a team that doesn't have Kawhi Leonard and not get that done. You can't. Yeah, I'm setting it up, Dan. I mean,
you are setting it up. You can win from every angle. Stephen A. Smith is saying Kawhi to Miami is his guess. He was saying that on television yesterday. I can't put bait on this hook for you, Mike.
No, you can. I've got like 2 weeks worth of basketball takes I want to fire off, and I think we're to blame for the Paul George stuff. It's concrete. It's stat driven that he's one of the worst playoff performers of all time. Now, it was an incredible game on the road, elimination. Don't want to dilute that. I guess I do. From the field, he has more 20% field goal percentage performances than anybody in the history that's taken that many shots. It's him, James Harden, and Kyle Lowry, who kind of turned around his playoff legacy with an NBA
and DeRozan,
title.
right?
Yeah, it's DeRozan. I don't think even qualifies for this anymore. Paul George, statistically, is one of the worst perimeter playoff performers of all time. Amazing game, amazing moment. He's got 2 more games. I don't think no one's going to really remember a game 5 if he goes out in 6. No one's really going to remember that game 5 if he goes out in game 7. So I think we're to blame with this. We've made it a roller coaster. That was one very good game, but you look at his playoff postseason career as a whole, very disappointing player.
He gave himself the nickname Playoff P, but I do believe if you make the sample size representative, if you keep extending it over time, that's going to get more and more confusing, right? Because I imagine if we watch a run from the Nets, you're going to see all of a sudden James Harden change some of the conversation around him.
I was surprised because this plays into like the 2 weeks of basketball takes. Kevin Durant was so amazing. And you guys voiced it. Like what Durant did off of that injury, pretty unprecedented at that size in that turnaround time. It was incredible.
At that age.
At that age. Amazing stuff. A lot of tread on those tires. I can't believe he's going to play in the Olympics. But not a lot of people were doing the victory dance on, we were right about the Nets. You want to throw out the Tyler Hero memes, however historically inaccurate. James Harden wasn't in shape. His hammy might have given out because he was not in shape. We still have no idea if that experiment works. Everything that we were saying about the Nets in the lead up to the postseason ended up being true outside of Kevin Durant being fully healthy. We had our question marks about him, but all the question marks about that Nets team were dead on.
It's funny that you say that because I believe that most of the people listening to this are saying they're not dead on because Milwaukee's going to win the championship. They were shoe size from beating Milwaukee, and then the reinforcements are coming, which is Kyrie and James Harden. I don't think you can make an evaluation on this Nets team based on what it is that we just saw. Because Mike, you can't say that the audience doesn't believe that if you add healthy James Harden and Kyrie Irving, that the Nets can't be a shoe size better.
Okay, but we were saying this, Stugotz, for a year.
Right.
And they weren't healthy. Kyrie got hurt. James Harden got hurt. And now the NBA rules are changing to maybe neutralize what James Harden does best. And as that player ages, he's not going to have the same offensive weapon that he has in his repertoire, which is getting to the line because they're going to eliminate some of that from the game.
Mike, you're right. They were hurt, but had they stayed healthy, that team, and I know that was one of the criticisms, can this team stay healthy? They didn't stay healthy, but had they stayed healthy, that team wins the NBA
title. We're going to keep
title.
saying that about this
No, Mike,
team.
they do. Come on.
We're going to keep saying that about this team. Had they stayed healthy? Because James Harden's body gave out. He wasn't in shape that entire season. Every time he tried to come back, it would be cyclical. He would re-injure himself. So I'm saying we were right about the Brooklyn Nets for this one season. Now, a full offseason, maybe we finally get to see this team healthy, but we don't even have a representative sample size of those 3 on the court together.
I don't know that any circumstance that involves a macro opinion is allowed to be right when it's a shoe size. When it's a shoe size from being wrong.
That's fair enough, but it was right about Harden and Kyrie.
Yep.
It was right.
No, that's right. No, that's true. To factor in the fact that team is more likely to get injured because they've got a bunch of guys who are older and get injured. Like that's a fair structural crack in the blueprint of what it is that's been built there.
And I don't want to write off James Harden as a player. He's a very talented offensive player, and he was exploiting an inefficiency in that sport. But you got to imagine he's going to the line fewer times a game going forward after they changed this rule. And I just pointed out how inefficient he is from the field in the postseason. He's not a noted playoff performer. You have to start having your question marks. Like, I think we've seen the peak of James Harden.
How many takes do you have? I mean,
oh, I didn't even get to the Philadelphia 76ers.
Oh, you must have been.
I want all 2 weeks of
you
takes.
must. I
Also,
think
can I start with Jason
Kidd? People
Kidd,
will want to be getting rid of you immediately if we give you the.
Can I start with Jason Kidd? Because we all have our questions about Jason Kidd. Well, like, just looking from a coaching aspect. Y'all dig into that pass because it was a pretty big deal when he was playing.
Oh my God, I don't understand how he keeps getting recycled.
I don't. He has great relationships, right? He has tremendous relationships. Damian Lillard kind of Trojan horsed his. That's the way the superstars do it. Make an impossible request from a team. There's no way. He probably knows there's no way that Jason Kidd's going to be the head coach. And now you make it look like the Trailblazers won't do what you want and you have no recourse but to leave. Trade anything you got if you're the Miami Heat for Damian Lillard. Trade anything you got. But besides the point, Jason Kidd finds his way back in Dallas, and I know he has relationships with that organization, but why? Why? What has he done? You could point to him and say, well, he's developed players, and he did develop Giannis, but all these players end up getting better. All these teams end up getting better when he leaves.
His most famous moment is throwing that drinker, fumbling his way and pretending to knock a drink on the court to get a timeout and just putting a sticky substance all over the court. He doesn't have a better coaching moment than that. That is a tribute to we are getting closer and closer to equality in that sport in the coaching ranks, that guy specifically can get recycled again and again. And this is a byproduct of Dirk Nowitzki, loving him. Dirk Nowitzki being brought in because they've got to please Luka, because they've upset Luka. There are all sorts of reports, Stugotz, that Luka doesn't even like Porzingis and is mad at Porzingis for going to strip clubs during the pandemic and getting fined $50,000 during the playoffs. And what an amazing job for Jason Kidd to get after you've seen what's happened to the Milwaukee Bucks since he was given the treasure of young superstar that we all know is going to be a superstar in Giannis. And he's still out here getting jobs, and Dallas and Portland are basically fighting for the idea of getting Jason Kidd when all of us are asking, what has he done other than got along with players? But that's the new model now, Stugotz, because these guys, Chauncey Billups, whether it's Steve Kerr or Derek Fisher or a bunch of guys who end up cutting the line to these head coaching jobs. How does Tim Duncan feel about all this?
He walked away from coaching. So I understand what the point that you're getting at, but I think Tim Duncan wants different things from life. To circle back to Kidd, though, Mark Cuban learned nothing from the most recent front office scandal there, considering the baggage that Jason Kidd has. And I don't want to look, there's been quite a few years separated from his lengthy history, right? But it's still a history. And if it's any other candidate that doesn't have ties to that organization, we're saying, why is the Dallas Mavericks of all teams making this type of hire with spousal abuse in his past? I get it because it's a relationship thing. Maybe there's a superstar they're going for, which is curious because they hired a Nike guy, Dame Lillard, who wanted Jason Kidd as an Adidas guy, but not enough questions are being asked publicly of them.
Tim Duncan walked away from coaching?
Yeah.
He didn't like
fundamental.
He didn't like being an assistant. Wow, you were just holding on to the big fundamental.
I didn't realize that.
You didn't have the window to have the joke. Wait a minute.
Yeah, the window closed very quickly. I was like halfway through.
You just wanted to get to the big fundamental.
Well, I was not aware. And then you said, how does Tim Duncan feel about this? Clearly, he doesn't care. I mean,
well, I don't know whether he liked the assistant coach's job. I think that is.
He wanted to go straight to head coach.
Well, they all do. Like, why? What line? Look at all the lines being cut.
You got to pay your dues, Dano.
We're talking about Chauncey Billups. We're talking about.
He did pay his dues, though.
He did.
He waited for a long time before someone let him cut the line.
you're finding all of this when you talk about Jason Kidd, because there's more there than just that. There's the drunk driving that he came into the league with, even though it was a long time ago. There's also his wife or his ex-wife coming on this show and telling stories to everybody. And I still remember the quote, even though this was 10 years ago, that sometimes success takes you to places where your character can't keep up. And it is a fairly amazing thing to watch not only Jason Kidd recycled, but recycled by that organization, to see how the applause, Stugotz, how the applause when you have these regional identities tied up in winning a championship in your place can obscure a whole lot of things. I mean, Karl Malone has some stuff that you're like, whoa, wince-worthy stuff, and he returns to Utah and is simply conquering hero with no hard questions. I just don't think that we're the best show to be asking the hard questions, given what just happened with us and Scottie Pippen, and given what happened with the rest of the nation's credible journalists and Scottie Pippen.
I just want to read Mark Cuban's quote from 2018 after that investigation came out in Sports Illustrated about the front office culture. He said, "First, just an apology to the women involved. This is not something that is just an incident and then it's over. It stays with people, it stays with families, and I'm just sorry I didn't see it. I'm sorry I didn't recognize it."
Jimmy Kimmel gets canceled like every 2 months by Twitter trying to be like, well, remember that one time he was Karl Malone. He gets canceled more often for trying to be Karl Malone than Karl Malone does for actually being Karl Malone.
How many more basketball takes do you have? Because I want to get you and Whittingham, and we got Roger Bennett later on today. You and Whittingham can't shut up about soccer. So I figure that the audience.
You are really setting Mike up to fail today,
well, but it's also the stuff that he wants to talk about. I mean, he just told you he's got. You thought he was clogged up in terms of his digestive tract. Imagine how much suffering it was for Mike Ryan to see the Philadelphia 76ers fall on their face like that and not have a microphone near him. I can imagine him aging his daughter by just shouting laughing takes in her face about all of the Sixers.
I saw you get aggregated, which I enjoyed, for pointing out that Philadelphia fans love being cruel, and then they responded by being cruel to you. Hey, we're not cruel. It's like when you turn on a kitchen light and the cockroaches go scurrying about. This team and their fan base in particular, they get so loud. Game 7 of an NBA regular season when they trounce the Wizards, and it's like they accomplished something, and yet here we are again, and they can't get out of the second round. There are adult males that wear a way too tight Julius Erving jersey that their only memory of this franchise doing anything is losing in the NBA Finals in 5. Like, the big victory in their life, hang a banner, is Allen Iverson stepping over Ty Lue in a gentleman's sweep, right? But every year, when they get off to a hot start or win 4 in a row, or Ben Simmons decides to make a free throw, you call into question the idea that they tanked to get where they are, which is nowhere, by the way. Nowhere. Daryl Morey said 26 other teams would love to be in our situation. I'll pass.
They got further than the Heat, though.
They got one round further for all that talk. They got one round further. So if you want to be recent history guy, Billy, 9 months ago, Jimmy Butler's decision was validated by making it to an NBA Finals. They go nowhere. They go nowhere. And they go nowhere for the same reasons that we've been calling out, much like the Nets. This is basically me saying I was right about them all along.
Is that what all your takes are going to be?
It's amazing.
Yeah, it's they want to prop up Ben Simmons, make him a player that he hasn't been his entire career, a confusing half-ass player his entire career, just to cut him down. Like, you want to get mad at Ben Simmons for not taking a shot? The hell you been watching his entire career?
The Sixers one requires a little bit less gymnastics about being right than the Nets one. The Nets one was, like, everyone knows that if they were healthy, they would have clearly won the championship 4-4-4. Like they would have absolutely rampaged through the playoffs. They're obviously the best team.
Mike is saying he saw the injuries. He saw them.
The Kyrie one. The Kyrie one
Yeah,
makes
like
sense.
LeBron.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't
The Kyrie one
understand.
makes sense. Like the James Harden's never been hurt. Ever.
Yeah, except for at the beginning of the season, and he was out of shape. And as soon as he gets to the Nets, and you realize that this player is not really playing himself into shape. they do this weird minutes thing. So I understand your point. It's offensively, when you look at the scope of what they've done individually as historical talents, yeah, 4-4-4. It's fun to do that shit, but we haven't seen them all play together.
But they defended well in these playoffs. Like, even without, like, before James Harden got hurt in that series, James Harden and the Nets were defending very well against Milwaukee. Like, they were clearly better than them. And I don't think that, like, Atlanta was gonna do a number on them.
Okay.
Like, maybe in the finals against Phoenix, it would have been hard, but man, it's hard not to see Brooklyn as obviously the best team.
I think we do this with Milwaukee all the time. When they miss their shots, teams defend well. They have players that go streaky like that. They depend on the mid-range game. Chris Middleton will get you 38 one game, and then he'll throw up a 5 for 24, and you're like, what the hell happened? That's just when you throw the dice against the Milwaukee Bucks. I'm not going to give them so much credit. I'd like to look at the historical sample of individual defenders, Kevin Durant notwithstanding, because when he was at Golden State, he was a tremendous defensive player, didn't get enough credit for that aspect of his game. But I think the chickens would come home to roost on Kyrie Irving's individual defense. And James Harden absolutely got cooked there. And I don't know how much of it is hammy or how much of it is effort, but they're like, forget hammy. You're out there on the court. They're easy rebounds, and I don't know how much he got crucified for it nationally. The game changes because he can't get to a rebound.
And he couldn't move around anybody.
But he's never been the most fleet of foot type of player. So I don't know how much of this is just maybe this is who James Harden's going to be because we've seen the best out of him. I think you have to project some of that.
You have to look at the metrics in order to do the defensive stuff, because I think it's really hard to do with your eyes, open looks versus good defense versus contested looks. I don't know if the audience knows that Middleton in the last fourth quarter hit more contested shots than any player has in the playoffs this year. It was not only that he was hot, it's that he was making all of his shots against contested the same way Paul George was last night.
I don't think it's confusing at all to look at anything. I mean, damn, we criticized the Nets defense the entire regular season. Whittingham is right on this. The Nets played better defense in the postseason. They won that game one with Kevin Durant by himself, without Kyrie Irving. Like, they blew him out, and everyone thought,
it was game two. Yeah, they won game two, and then Kyrie Irving got hurt. Billy,
they gave up 86 points in that game.
Billy, I feel your frustration. I feel it.
I'm not frustrated. I'm good.
No, because
you're frustrated,
because Heat fans are going to do this again with Lillard, right?
I mean, and Kawhi and everyone that it's ever going to be somewhat available. Stephen A. didn't even say that Kawhi was going to come to Miami. Stephen A. said, I don't see him leaving LA. He likes LA, but does LA even want him? Which was like, whoa. And he's like, no one has said this, but is it a good fit for the Clippers? I don't know. And I have to say it because no one else is. And he's like, I could see him maybe going to Miami, but he's not leaving LA.
Well,
and he's not going to the Lakers.
Yeah, he said Miami is more likely than the Lakers, is what he said.
I've actually been surprised in all the Lillard talks. I've heard like 3 podcasts that have pitched fake trades for Lillard. The Heat are not mentioned even once. Like the Heat, with their absence of draft picks, we don't talk enough about. Like, they want to be in for everyone. They don't have draft picks to give away. Some of their young players got devalued by this postseason. Like, every big trade, Drew Holiday got traded for picks and swaps. Like, the Heat don't have that to offer. They're not going to be in on these conversations until they do.
What did you think of Ethan Skolnick? Ethan Skolnick is a very credible Miami Heat reporter, has sources within the organization, but I did think it was amusing that he has reported that there is more than a 75% chance that the Miami Heat are going to trade Tyler Hero. I don't know how it is that you can arrive at that particular fraction.
I love that kind of reporting, man.
I mean, it's basically just the Heat are sick of Tyler Hero is what he's hearing, right? And like, if they get a chance to include him in any trade package, they will. I mean, the question is like, if you're just announcing that he will be traded, I guess it depends on, well, what are you including him? Are you including him in a superstar deal, or are you trading Tyler Hero straight up for something?
No, it's got. If you want Lillard, it's got to be. I'm not even sure that's enough, but it's got to be Bam and Hero.
But how did that happen so fast? If we go back 9 months to the finals, how are they already sick and tired of Tyler Hero that they're ready to include him in any trade package?
I've done some reporting on this. They are. This season was a real step back, not just for Tyler Hero on the court, but off the court with his relationships with the team. They're not buddy-buddy. They're not in arm in arm with Jimmy Butler leaving games anymore. Now, part of that is a success, but I think the Miami Heat feel internally that their on-court success was affected by how Tyler Hero approached the game this season.
Do you want to one-up Ethan Skolnick and say there's a better than 76% chance that he gets traded?
I don't want to one-up him there. I would say that people can do some...
Do it,
Mike.
Do some poking around.
Reporting. Do it. Report it right now. He's out of here.
I would
82.
say the relationship with Tyler Hero and Jimmy Butler is in no way as good a shape as it was last season. Now, you can point to the winning. Jimmy Butler is that kind of player that if things are frustrating on the court, maybe he'll be a little icy, but they seem like best friends. They were inseparable. They were going to watch PSG games together. They are not the same kind of friends.
19 years old, Miami, the city of Miami, fame at a young age, swagger in the finals. It is interesting to think of the idea that so much of the Miami Heat fan base was saying that James Harden doesn't fit culturally with what they do, when you don't need to do any reporting. You just need to look at his social media and you know that doesn't fit with what the Miami Heat do. That doesn't fly with 70-year-old plus Pat Riley and 70-year-old plus Mickey Arison.
I do think too unfairly, we're going to just say it was Tyler Hero for James Harden. And that's the way history is going to always remember it. That's a narrative. What Chris Whittingham is saying is absolutely right. They don't have the picks to get in any of these conversations. Everybody wants to do the OKC thing. Hoard picks. It's amazing trade capital. I don't think the Miami Heat didn't have enough to do it with James Harden. If they didn't have enough to do it with James Harden, they're certainly not going to have enough to do it with Damian Lillard, unfortunately, because there isn't a single player on the Miami Heat roster that I don't turn over for Damian Lillard. I basically go to Portland and say, have at it. And then whatever's left, we'll try to build around that guy. I think that guy is that special.
Dan, I'm going to do it. 100% certainty that Tyler Hero gets traded from the Heat. I am reporting it. I've done some digging, some researching. I've spoken to some of my sources within the organization.
Some digging in your nose.
I did do that too. Yeah. But I am telling you that he's gone. Okay? Pack your bags, Tyler.
Ben Simmons, another one of the guys who is linked to the Heat, because all of these guys end up getting linked to the Heat. Do you want him, Mike? Because there are some are saying that Eric Spoelstra can fix all of that they can fix his shooting and everything there can be fixed.
Well, who's going to have the guts? I don't know what you trade for Ben Simmons. Maybe Tyler Hero and some bad contracts. Again, I don't know what you give there, but let's just say you just acquire Ben Simmons and he's here with Bam Adebayo and Jimmy Butler. That's your core. You got two guys that when you need them to step up offensively, either shy away from the moment, aren't aggressive, or simply don't take the shot. And you got an aging Jimmy Butler, who, when people are saying, if you look at an untouchable player on the Miami Heat roster, it's Bam Adebayo. It's not Jimmy Butler, because look at those shooting splits. They keep tumbling down. He played for Tom Thibodeau. I'd be really concerned about that. At the same time, good luck trying to score on them. That's one of the more versatile defensive units.
Ben Simmons is exactly, if you are a believer in, quote, Heat culture, that's what you do. Right? You go and grab the guy who is clearly not being maximized somewhere else, right? Because basically what Heat culture is you can reclaim anyone, right? You can fix James Johnson.
No.
You can fix Hassan Whiteside. You can fix anyone. Fix Ben Simmons.
No, but we couldn't even wrap our brain around fixing James Harden, who's one of the greatest offensive shooting guards of all time.
We've decided that it was stupid.
It was, but we were pointing to cultural fit, and Ben Simmons doesn't get enough of this shit nationally. Jimmy Butler left because of Ben Simmons' approach to the game. Ben Simmons is all the things off the court, minus the strip clubs, probably, than James Harden. Like, they're like the same non-cultural fit.
With a little bit of Kendall Jenner thrown in. Even Harden was scared of everything happening with Kardashians. He ran for his life there.
Well, not anymore, and it seems to be a glow-up for Devin Booker, to be quite honest.
I know it's not anymore, but he's gone back. There's been like 6 or 7 breakups there. Have there not, between Ben Simmons and Kendall Jenner? I don't know. Put it on the poll, Guillermo, at Le Batard Show. Which is worse for Heat culture? Ben Simmons' links to Kendall Jenner, James Harden's strip club dalliances, or just everything Tyler Hero? I have been remiss, though, Billy, because the conversation of the day, and welcome back, Mike. I hope that you have properly annoyed the audience I can't wait to get to soccer talk.
Oh, Jesus.
He had a doozy at the Euro yesterday.
You might want to do that later in the week.
Oh, did you see that header from Azpilicueta?
No.
Space ourselves.
No, we don't need to pace ourselves because Billy is right when he says, I believe angrily, there are too many milks to choose from.
Way too many milks to
Yeah.
choose from.
Mhm.
Am I wrong about that? There's too many milks. I actually looked this up. I went milk shopping yesterday, as you may have guessed. What a mistake that was. I was doing this low-fat, no, what is it? What's the milk? Lactose-free milk, right? Because my wife drinks lactose-free milk, but she had to stop drinking that milk because it was getting the baby all gassy and the poopies were not looking good and she was getting a little constipated. So we had to change the type of milk that my wife was drinking because, as you know, the mother drinks the milk and then passes the milk to the baby. It's a whole thing, Dan. You'll learn one day. So anyways, she had to change the milk that she's doing. So then we were trying to figure out, well, what type of milk should she drink now? So then we started doing this almond vanilla milk. And then there was soy milk. And then I had to go get the other lactose milk for me because I'm now used to the lactose-free milk when I'm making my coffee in the morning. So I have that, but I couldn't find that. And then I was like, there's about 17 different types of milks here. Why are there so many milks? These can't all be milk, right? They can't all be milk. They're different milk type drinks, but they're not all milk. We can't say that they're all milk. Dan, they cannot all be milk.
Well, what is milk, according to you? Just something that comes from a cow? Because everything else is obviously a milk substitute. It's something that either doesn't have lactose, or if you're going with the nut milks, it's something that is dairy-free as well.
Well, Dan, I'm on homestratosphere.com, and it says there's 22 types of milks. That's too many milks. Why do we need 22 milks? Milk nutritional facts chart: whole milk, 2% milk, low-fat milk, organic milk, skim milk, raw milk, lactose-free milk, flavored milk, full cream milk, soy milk, almond milk, rice milk, buttermilk, ultra-filtered milk, evaporated milk, sweetened condensed milk, oat milk. And I'm sure that's not even skimming the top of the milk food chart, right? Why do we have so many milks?
Can you put it on the poll, please, at Lebitard
question.
Show, over or under 22, number of milks? Just number of milks. Flavored milk feels a little bit like cheating. I got to be honest with you.
What, like chocolate
Well,
milk?
flavored milk is just milk.
Billy, there have been lawsuits about whether or not milk companies that aren't using dairy milk can call themselves milk.
Good. And how did those end?
It's caught up in litigation. Let's get an expert. Let's get Michael McCann on again to ask him.
Big Dairy is very litigious. They got a good team over there.
I mean, there were also lawsuits about mayonnaise. There were like vegan mayonnaise companies calling themselves Mayo, and then Big Mayo was like, you can't call yourself Mayo if you're vegan because you don't have the eggs in it, and the eggs are what make mayo mayo.
Speaking of mayo, did you guys see Oreo mayonnaise?
Unbelievable.
How disgusting does that look?
May Oreo is what it's called.
You've had it?
No, God, no. I saw the same things you did. And it's not Oreo mayo. It's May Oreo so that you can have the O right in the middle there. It seems like one of the worst ideas I've ever
It
seen.
actually sounds pretty good.
Oh,
Yeah, it
my
does.
God.
I'm gonna
Oh,
try
it doesn't.
No, it does.
Oh.
Could have sworn Dan was doing a deconstructed May Oreo for several years before they actually consolidated the two.
What can possibly be more fattening than just mayo or just Oreos? I know. I will put them all in a blender. That can't work,
Yummy.
though. That can't sell. It can't. Can it? I mean, you're just marketing to the Honey Boo Boo family, correct? Like, what are you marketing to there on May Oreo?
I think you guys all got duped by a Photoshop. I think that May Oreo was fake news, and we might need to go back to a media literacy class here on the Lebitard Show.
You say it's fake news, but I've been eating it for 2 decades. We were fooled by that. We were fooled by the internet.
Back to milk. How do you guys deal with expiration dates? If it's 1 day past, but you open it up and it still smells fine, will you eat it or drink it?
Absolutely, yes.
Dangerous
Oh,
game.
no.
It's all about the smell. That's it. For me, it's all about the smell. If it smells foul, I will not drink it. If it smells good. And by the way, Fairlife milk. I don't know if you guys have tried it, but Fairlife chocolate milk, a cold glass, is one of the greatest things. In fact, probably the most underrated thing in the drink category. How about that?
Why
Yeah.
does milk from a carton last a lot longer than the milk in the plastic? I don't understand that. The plastic container has a shelf life of like maybe a week and a half. But I get something from a carton, I'm like, wow, if we find ourselves in a zombie apocalypse, I think I'm good.
Do you guys go through all the milks and you look at all the expiration dates? You go to the back, grab the one that's like 2 weeks later.
Yep.
I mean, that's an obvious thing there, but a lot of
a
people
heady
don't do it.
play.
You don't grab
Yeah.
that first one. Dig a little deeper.
No. The newer ones are usually in the front because they just push everything back. I do the same thing with bread. I start looking at the bread saying, when does this bread expire? And then you start looking at the top and then you move some things around. I always get the one that's like 2 days longer, even though I'm probably going to eat it well before then.
Billy, the stock people at your Publix are the worst. They're doing their job poorly.
You go to the world's
What do you mean?
laziest Publix.
I'm telling you, most of the time, the later expiration date are tucked away. in
No,
the
Billy's
back.
right. I used to do this. One of my first jobs at a pharmacy. Okay, I used to stock the
Oh,
shelves.
Yeah.
no.
Our point
See?
validated.
The world's laziest public. Here comes the guy to say that you're not lazy. Go ahead, Stugotz. Let's hear what you've got to say.
You got to put the new fresh ones up front. You bump the old ones to the back. That's the way you kind of.
Why wouldn't you want the ones that are closest to being expired to sell quick?
I don't know. That's just the way they taught me to do it.
No.
I mean,
Nobody taught you
No.
how to
Nobody
do it.
taught you a
Stugotz.
liar.
Sell drugs. That's what they taught me. I
Nobody
mean,
taught you. That doesn't make any sense. You are lying and blaming a fictitious teacher that did not exist at that drugstore. That's how they taught me. Look at him. He passes the buck even when it comes to that.
It wasn't my fault.
There's no way someone taught you to do it that way. Guillermo, put these things on the poll, please. Does Billy go to the world's laziest public? What is Publix?
With
What
an
i-
X, yeah.
Thank you. What is it that you said? Fairfield chocolate milk? I've not
Fair
heard.
Life chocolate milk is one of the most underrated things in the drink category.
That's what I
Yeah.
wanted to ask. Is Fair what? Call it and say it again. Fair
Life.
Fair Life chocolate milk, the most underrated thing in the drink category. And I do think we should ask the question of ourselves in the audience of, I think most people, one day expired in a sniff, you're not throwing that away, whatever it is, if it smells correctly. But how many days before, like who among us is willing to play the most dangerous of games, which is to go 5-6 days expired on whatever?
I'm not. Maybe it's psychosomatic, but as soon as it's the day, I kind of pick up hints on, man, this just doesn't smell right. Have you guys ever been shopping for milk? And the reason why they bump up the milk that's more bound to expire sooner up to the front is they stock them from the back. Have you ever been shopping for milk or at a gas station trying to get a beer and you've caught the very same moment where someone is stocking the shelf as you're pulling something away? It's like a glitch in the matrix. It's haunting. You feel like there's just a disembodied arm just there stocking things and you caught something that you're not supposed to.
Do you guys, when you were like a little kid and you went grocery shopping, did you ever not know that there were people back there and then one day you saw like a hand and you were like, that happened to me when I was little. It changed my life. It was the scariest thing I've ever seen.
But that's not all grocery stores. Like I imagine gas stations are like that, not grocery stores. Like some grocery stores just have like the refrigerated shelves that you go out there. So that's why if you're loading it from the back, then the fresh ones are in the back, right? Which by the way, those contraptions, if you try to go back and then you take it off and then you think you're gonna like push it back and put it back in the front, almost impossible to push the things back and load them from the front, which is why they load them from behind. But the ones that are just shelves, I have to think that people aren't moving all the old ones forward and loading them behind them, right?
Guillermo, I think people who care about their work and their employer might do that correctly, but put it on the poll, please, at Batard Show. Have you ever been haunted by reaching for the milk and not realizing that a human being with a hand was reaching out toward you?
Dan, you're not talking to the delivery people. You need to talk to the delivery people because what happens is they make multiple stops every day. So they got to go in, they got to drop off their merch, and then they got to hit up like 8 or 9 other places. And by the way, if you talk to delivery people, this is something that I've learned. You want to know what the number one thing, the number one haul in delivery is in grocery stores? Guess what it is. The end all be all. I'm the delivery person for this product. This is what makes the most money.
The number one thing delivered to a store? What is it, beer?
No.
Can I guess?
Yes.
Cigarettes?
No. This, according to the nut delivery man that I spoke to, he says that bread is the big haul. That one load of bread being dropped off at a grocery store can get you $250,000 in sales. But what happens is you have to sell it. But bread is something that people always want. So bread flies off the shelf. So you don't have to eat it, no pun intended, in terms of deliveries and them going bad.
That's
People
a lot
always
of
want
dough.
bread.
Oh.
That's a killer. It was a good joke, too.
God.
I
It
thought
was
Billy was done, but you
my
never know
fault.
when Billy's done. No, it's not. It's my
Never
fault.
know.
So good.
Yeah. A lot of dough was what I tried to say.
Prankster's delight, I think, stocking grocery store shelves. You could have so much fun with that. Imagine you just do your face up like a zombie one day and someone pulls what they think is the last milk and it's just your head, like with its tongue out.
Put it on the poll as well. At Batard Show. Is the grocery store a prankster's delight?
When you're asking somebody at a grocery store where something's located, do you prefer that they just tell you the aisle, or they do that thing where they're like, "Here, follow me," and then they're like walking you to the item?
I don't want to follow anyone.
Yeah, I
Just
don't like
point me
that.
to the aisle,
I feel like
please,
I'm
okay?
disrupting your day. Just tell me the aisle and I'll find it. It makes me feel stress when they stop what they're doing. Oh, come on, I'll walk you over. They think they're being nice, but I'm like, please don't. Just tell me what aisle.
Stress?
I mean, I feel like, because they're like, oh, I'm trying to stock this shit here, and now I got to walk over to aisle 8 just to show you where the mayo is.
Sometimes you ask, Dan, and you're like, listen, you might get to it, right? You're not going right there. I don't need to be walked there. Just tell me what aisle the steak is in, okay? And I'll get it later. I'll get it on my own time, all right? That's all.
But sometimes they're like, oh, it's in the aisle with blah, blah, blah. And then you can't find it and you're just walking around in circles and they're not very nice sometimes. I don't know.
We have
It's a game I'm willing to take that risk. I'm with you
No
there.
way.
There is that chance of happening, but the stress I feel from them walking with me is worse than that.
What if it's a spice in the spice aisle? Good luck. How are you going to find that spice if they don't show you exactly where it is?
The toughest of aisles.
But I love a good spice aisle. I don't mind searching for something on a spice aisle because I might find something else I want. A spice aisle is a nice thing. I generally, any trip to the store, I'll buy some sort of spice, add it to my spice cabinet.
We really have the full spectrum here of the way that people experience the grocery store, because here are Stugotz and Chris actively running away from extra help while Billy can't stop chatting up delivery people.
You're not curious? Like, when someone says I'm the nut delivery person, you don't go like, what is that? How does that work out? What does your day look like? What does your week look like? How do the sales work? You're not curious? People have curious jobs all over the world, Dan. You take these things for granted. How did those nuts get from wherever nuts come from to the shelf in the grocery store? I don't know. I have to ask.
Billy, the thing that I'm marveling at is Chris and Stugotz actively sprinting away from people who are trying to help, and then a delivery man actively sprinting away from you because no one asked them those sorts of questions. So if you guys are in the same grocery store, you got Chris and Stugotz running in one direction. Like that cannot be. Somebody who's a delivery man or a delivery woman must think you're hitting on them if you're that curious about the bread and the nuts.
No, people just like to talk about themselves and share their stories. Now, if they're up against a deadline, then I could see how I'm slowing them down and making their job more difficult that day. But how many times do you think like a nut delivery person's like, I wish my story was told and people realize, how difficult things were. So I ask.
Do you guys believe that the people and the lawyers and the marketers in milk are getting together and being like, we had a great run. We had this entire thing to ourselves. But now you got the soy and you got a coconut shortage because we're hitting the coconut milk so hard. You got almond milk, you got oat milk. It has to have taken a giant hit from like the days of the milkman coming to your door in the 1950s and milk having a monopoly on things, right? There has to be people actively working to figure out, you got to be kidding me. We've got 22 flavors of milks here. We've got 22 competitors
Used to just
now.
be us,
It's like podcasts. You can't, the podcasts are growing at such an alarming rate. Everyone's trying to get in the milk game.
And milk has such a monopoly on pairings, too. You can't have a cookie without milk. Oh, you cannot do that. You can't
Or a
have
chocolate brownie. There's so much.
You can't have
Pancakes.
cereal.
Waffles.
Can't have cereal without the milk. It's a fundamental ingredient. It's more crucial than the actual cereal itself. You need your cereal with milk. I did find an answer, and I do actually like this aspect of being live. People are actually helpful on social media. The reason why milk expires more quickly in the clear plastic containers because it lets more light in where the cardboard doesn't. You can apply the same sort of logic when it comes to beers, whereas let's say your favorite Mexican flavored Pilsner type beer is more likely to get skunked if you leave it out in the day as opposed to something in a brown bottle.
Cerveza.
I also need to add, while we're on the topic of expiration dates, because I have a family member who works in the food service industry, expiration dates are almost completely arbitrary.
A scam, right?
There is no federal regulation on what an expiration date means. and what happens when something expires. It's basically just like a ballpark that the manufacturers have to put out.
I trusted that. This feels like a betrayal to me. I
Yeah,
feel
but they're trying to get you to throw it away quicker so you go back and
No.
buy more. Yeah, I'm telling you.
except for
what I
you,
would do.
except for you, who were taught in the drugstore days to put those
Salem drugs, Dana.
in the bag. Why did you feel the need to make up a teaching?
I have
that-
experience. I mean,
Why did you feel the need to create an imaginary teacher to teach you the wrong thing in a drugstore 35 years ago?
This Mayorio thing now is bothering me. Not because I was fooled, but like, who did that and why did they do that? Why did they waste time doing that? Because they fooled a bunch of people, but don't even get credit for it. Who created that? Who knows? Why did they waste their time doing that?
What an anarchist, too. It's just like their master plan is unfolded. And it's just to trick people into thinking this is an actual product.
I feel so betrayed by this news, Jessica. I trusted expiration dates. Please put it on the poll, Guillermo. Do you trust
Scam.
expiration
I
dates?
feel like we're being reckless by throwing that out there because
Yeah.
out of all the unctuous and uncomfortable things that came along with watching the Tiger King documentary, the one that actually stayed with me is not Carol Baskin possibly murdering her husband. It's the fact that these carnies in an Oklahoma zoo are eating old Walmart meat.
Roger Bennett going to join us later in the show, Howard Bryant as well. But every Tuesday, we like catching up with Ron McGill. And one of the things that I want to ask him before we get to our questions, because Ron McGill has been doing this, as we've told you, for a long time for free, comes on every week, and we're endlessly entertained, and it's a lot of fun, and we never run out of questions. And we've been helping his endowment, but also a lot of the guys here have been making a little extra money on the side doing Cameo and making your friends and family feel good if they're people who like the show. And of course, they're delighted when Ron McGill tunes in or chimes in and gives somebody a heartfelt message of some sort. Or I imagine, Ron, and I don't know what kind of questions you're getting, but I imagine a lot of people want you to answer hypothetical fights between animals. Or are you mostly getting sentimental birthday types of requests? What are some of the good questions you've been getting on Cameo?
Oh, I've been getting those standard, who wins between a gorilla and a lion? And, how many lions would it take to kill an elephant? And, that kind of stuff. But, the really rewarding ones are the parents who are calling me saying, listen, my kid loves animals. And I've got my kid to listen to these segments on Batard. And if you could just wish him a happy birthday or congratulate him for graduating and give him some great incentive because they want to get involved in wildlife careers. I mean, that is really rewarding for me. And then the guys who call me up and say, it's because of you, I've gotten my wife to listen to the show because she loves animals and she thinks that sports sometimes are a little stupid, but she loves the animal stuff. I feel like I've contributed something because, for years, Dan, I've been telling you, I keep pinching myself that I'm on this incredible ship of yours. And it's been really rewarding. I mean, the comments and questions I get and, kids contacting me to wish their parents a happy anniversary or happy birthday or whatever because they love the show and they particularly love this segment because they love learning about animals. So I feel like I've contributed something.
I learned the other day, this is something that I did not know, Stugotz, that there is not a position like Ron's anywhere in the country in terms of zoo ambassador, zoo public relations person, all of the roles that he plays. So Ron McGill, unique in many ways, but that's one of them. There's no one like him in the industry.
Ron, there are a couple of situations happening with birds in this country. During cicada season, some birds have been eating the cicadas and have died. And in New Mexico, there have been mysterious deaths happening to the birds. What's happening with these two situations?
Nobody really knows. Now, I'll tell you, with regard to the cicadas are not toxic at all. People can eat them. My suspicion is that the birds that are dying from eating cicadas are cicadas that maybe have ingested some type of, toxic substance, an insecticide of some sort. Because I know people are kind of losing their minds with that super generation that came out. Just it's enough to drive you crazy. And people might have started spraying a bunch of stuff to try to kill cicadas. And unfortunately, they don't die right away. And in the process of dying, become very susceptible to be eaten by birds, which are eating cicadas because they're usually good for birds and they love it. And unfortunately, they get some that have been, gotten an insecticide into them and that kills them. As far as the New Mexico birds go, we don't really know. There are instances where all of a sudden 30 birds fall out of the sky dead and nobody knows why. Literally rains dead birds. And they suspect there's things that might happen in the atmosphere. These might be high-flying birds and massive thunderclouds or something that happens there that causes this spontaneous death. But nobody really knows. It's kind of a mystery.
Ron, I'm not sure if you saw, but there was a woman in Florida who was live tweeting a raccoon that fell into her apartment and was like running rampant in her apartment. I'm wondering, what's the worst damage a raccoon could do in your apartment?
Well, the worst damage a raccoon could do is to you personally. If you were to corner it and didn't have an escape, they can give you some of the worst bites you can ever imagine. People look at raccoons and go, oh, they look so cute. Look at the little banded mascot, so furry cute. Those things, they'll tear you up in a heartbeat. So that's the worst thing they can do getting in your apartment. You want to say something? And you put your finger up.
They are cute. I mean, I want to cuddle with it. I want to
Jessica.
Put like a little
Stop it,
like
Jessica.
A little shirt, maybe like
Stop
a
it, Jessica.
Jessica. Some cute like mittens.
No, stop it. Stop it.
A little hat.
Okay. No, they are not pets. They're not cute. You don't dress them up. Okay. They can really do some serious damage to you. Having said that, they're very curious animals. They'll get into your refrigerator. They'll clear it out. There's a raccoon. I have a refrigerator in my yard and an outdoor island, a bar island that we have out there. And this flipping raccoon with her little kits comes in there every night. She opens up the refrigerator, and I got her on the camera because I got the little field camera. She opens up the refrigerator and she starts trying to get things out. She can't open any of the bottles. She hasn't learned how to open the cans of Coke or anything like that. But she opens the refrigerator and leaves it open so everything turns warm the next day. So I got to figure out a way that stop this raccoon from going in there. So they will, they're not going to rip things up. They're not going to bite. They're not like a dog that's going to tear things up, but they'll start shuffling everything around looking for food.
So Ron, although raccoons look cuddly and you want to snuggle with them, you say you shouldn't. What is an animal that looks like it shouldn't be cuddled and snuggly, but actually is?
Billy, there is no wild animal that should ever be cuddled or snuggled. Okay, let's just make that clear from the get-go.
Sad.
Well, it's not sad. It's the reason why it's a wild animal. Okay, there are many dogs and cats in shelters that really need some cuddling and snuggling. Domestic animals that have, for thousands of years, needed that companionship of human beings. If you want to cuddle and snuggle an animal, go to your local shelter and find one, Billy. Do not think about cuddling and snuggling raccoons or possums or foxes or anything else that you're thinking about right now.
But isn't there an off chance those animals are just misunderstood, Ron? They need love too, do they not?
Billy, I think a lot of people misunderstand you. You're very good at what you do. But having said that, no, they're not being misunderstood. Once they understand, the animals don't understand you're trying to cuddle them. I think, yes, if an animal understood that you were just trying to be social, but they don't, because their instinct for thousands of years has taught them to protect themselves from human beings, because human beings can be dangerous. So the bottom line is, please don't try to snuggle or cuddle any wild animal.
Tony, what do you have for Ron McGill?
Ron, could a monkey or a mountain goat scale like a building, or like, let's say, the Statue of Liberty or something like that?
I would suspect that a primate could pretty easily scale the Statue of Liberty. I don't think a mountain goat could really do it, only because there's no ledges. There's no type of ledge. The Statue of Liberty's got a nice smooth arm and smooth. It's not really a ledge. I suspect it could probably get maybe halfway up the statue, but it wouldn't make it all the way. Whereas a monkey, a primate, could probably grip certain areas and get itself all the way to the top. Yes, I think a monkey could do that.
What is that goat? Isn't there a goat? I've seen this video on Planet Earth.
Oh, yeah,
These goats on the side of mountains that don't need barely anything in the way of ledges.
Michael Jordan.
Keyword, Dan, barely anything. But they do have even an inch of cliff that they can grab onto. But if you have nothing, you have no cliff at all. If it's smooth, like the arm of the statue, I don't think they're going to be able to do it. Plus, they don't have the ability to grab around. So an arm, is only so wide. So they can't take their legs and hoofs and grab around and like a primate can, you see. They have to have a sheer cliff that's got a face that's wide enough to support their entire body. Even though it might be a little tiny bitty ledge, they do need that ledge.
You mentioned birds falling out of the sky dead, and I've heard of frogs falling out of the sky dead. Is there anything else that
in the Old Testament?
No, look, that happens. Does that not happen?
It's still happening.
Does frogs not happen? I think storms.
Sometimes it rains cats and dogs too.
I think storms sometimes rain frogs. Am I wrong about this?
I don't know how it would rain frogs because frogs can't fly. So, if maybe you're in a forest and there are frogs in the top of the tree and something's happened and frogs start falling out of the tree, I can see that. But frogs falling out of the sky, Dan, would take a little bit of incentive in the form of maybe drugs to.
Is there anything other than birds? Does it rain anything other than birds?
Spiders.
Yes. Butterflies? No, butterflies, like the monarch butterfly, when they migrate by the thousands, by the millions, that's how they discovered the migration of the monarch. It was on a mountain road in Michoacan where one of these citizen scientists was driving around, and all of a sudden, thousands of monarch butterflies started falling out of the sky. And that's how they realized that monarchs actually fly thousands of miles from southern Canada down to central Mexico for their annual migration. That's how it was discovered, because they were obviously caught up in a storm cloud, because these monarchs sometimes can fly over 5,000 feet up in the sky during their migration. And they all fell down, and that's how they found out the migration of the monarchs.
Dan, I have good news for you. The last time it rained frogs, in your defense here, was 2005 in Serbia. It did thousands of frogs rain from the sky.
AD or BC? It does rain spiders in Australia occasionally.
Ron, is it just me? Is there an influx of flies? Is it just me?
No, it might be just you, Stugotz, but flies, they come in huge waves, depending on the heat, depending on the humidity, depending on the availability of food. If you have something rotten or dying around your house or wherever you tend to be at the time, that is a big attraction of flies.
This actually leads perfectly to my question, because I was reading about the exact same opposite. Ron, are you familiar with a windshield phenomenon?
Not as you describe it. I mean, there's a lot
Okay.
of phenomenons with windshield, but what do you? Oh, about how animals sometimes do not get hit by windshield because of the raw air in front of it.
So for you and the audience that isn't familiar with windshield phenomenon, it's my second favorite active kooky conspiracy theory behind the fact that Avril Lavigne died in 2003 and was replaced by a body double named Melissa Vandala. So
No.
the windshield phenomenon is that there are fewer bugs, and it seems like the Stugotz of scientists started this whole thing because it's very self-involved. People have been making the observation that on longer drives, there are fewer bugs on their windshields and have deduced that there must be fewer bugs.
I guess that's a theory. I don't know how scientific it is. And it depends. Maybe there are fewer bugs of the type that get hit on the windshield, and there are more bugs of the bugs that don't fly or they get hit by the windshield. Or maybe, just maybe, the bugs are getting smarter and saying, you know what? Grandpa and grandma didn't make it when they went across that road. Let's stay over here off the road. You never know. I mean, there's a lot of theories that can come from that type of observation.
Okay, so your whole perspective on Avril Lavigne being replaced by a body double in 2003.
I'm open-minded. Let's leave it at that one. I'm open-minded. I'm not going to confirm or deny.
All right. You couldn't be open-minded on a water spout raining frogs, but that you're willing to be open-minded on.
Oh, well, now wait a minute, Dan. Wait a minute. If you're telling me that a water spout, in effect, a water tornado picked up frogs from a location, and as it dissipated, the frogs fell out of the sky. Okay, I can imagine that. That is a good point, Dan. I was not open-minded enough, but that is a possibility. But you'd have to assume that the water spout would go over a place where there's a ton of frogs, pick them up, and then all of a sudden stop where there are people. And I doubt that that's going to happen because people are going to be, running away. I don't know. But yeah, okay, I'll give you that. The frogs could come out of the sky if a water spout picked them up and dropped them.
So this, Ron, goes back to a conversation we had with Ryan Kerrigan last week, I think, where we talked about Sharknadoes actually being possible.
But the thing is, you just take it to an extreme. And it's not, no. A water
Why?
spout.
But why can't it
a
pick
water
up a
spout?
frog?
Because listen, Billy. The frogs are already out of the water. Frogs are up in the trees and they can get sucked up in the tornado. Sharks are in the water. The water spout is not going to take them up out of the water and lift up a shark. And like you saw in that movie, that is just, it's ridiculous. It's entertaining, but it's ridiculous, Billy.
I don't know.
Ron, thank you for being on with us. I am looking forward to, I hope one day around here we can end a segment with Billy asking you a question. And Ron, a decent man in the Kirkshin mold, just says, you know what, Billy, you're an asshole. Like just ends a segment.
I'm just trying to learn about the animals.
Ron, thank you for being on with us, sir.
Thanks, guys. Have a good week. Bye.
The spectator who caused the major crash at the Tour de France has reportedly fled the country.
Oh, wow.
Wow. Oh, I thought you were going to say she's been found.
Or turned herself in.
Reportedly fled
Wow.
the country. I don't know whether the reports are accurate or not. Jessica is, her mouth is hanging open. If you're the detective on that case, you're like, come on. This is what I'm getting stuck with.
You're probably getting fired.
I've got to
I
go
mean,
find this fugitive in another country who ruined the Tour de France with a sign.
Call Interpol, Dan. This is now becoming like the Da Vinci Code.
It's a definite movie possibility of the Stugotz of the
Billy,
female
Panama?
gender.
Panama?
You got to go to Panama. This is gross, honestly. Like, they're ruining this person's life over one mistake at the Tour de France. Like, did we learn nothing from Steve Bartman?
There are a whole lot of people who are trying to sue her, and there
for
are
what?
A bike race? Come on.
there are consequences to the race being damaged. The bikers obviously were waiting, the cyclists were waiting a long time to get into that race. It's a pretty prestigious race. She has altered some careers with her negligence, unintentional though it may have been.
According to this CBS News article, she got on a flight and is untraceable. She's untraceable, so she probably is in Panama. Good for her.
It's such a prestigious race that essentially every result gets overturned because we find out after the fact that every winner ever cheated. That's how prestigious this race is.
I'd be more interested in a bike race than a race to find the fugitive. They should all get on their bikes and find this fugitive. I mean, if they really care about it. I mean,
Jessica, did you just say good for her?
she did.
I mean, good for her. I don't know how I would become untraceable. Seems like a hard thing to do in 2021.
We had a big soccer day, and Roger Bennett is going to join us here. Always entertaining when he stops by. I do want to know, though, Whitty, do you have any remorse or regret? Do you have anything in the way of apology that you want to offer for calling Giannis a number 2 yesterday?
No. If anything, I listened back to it and I was like, I agree with myself.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, because I don't
here, huh?
I think in order to be a number 1, you have to, in the last 5 minutes of games, be in control. And so I think that Giannis, if that was the role he were to play, I don't think could win a title. I think he's the NBA's best number 2.
I love the idea of Chris Whittingham listening back to the podcast and being like, that guy, he's pretty smart.
Been there.
I just don't feel like you could be a number 2 and the MVP of the league. I don't think that
Twice.
there's any circumstance.
And the NBA awards MVP to the regular season MVP. It's a totally different skill set in the playoffs. And I think we've seen time and again that Giannis is the lead of a team in the playoffs. It's just not cut out for him.
They don't win the title in Whittingham's defense if Middleton doesn't play the way Middleton is playing. He has to play like that for them to win the title.
If you believe that Giannis is the number 2, then your head is going to short circuit when you try to form the argument, can a team ever win the title with Chris Middleton as its number 1? Because nobody would answer that
would be
question
the worst number
yes,
1.
unless the number 2 is so good that most people think of him as a number 1. I actually found interesting this part, Stugotz, because we were talking yesterday about Giannis's humility and saying, look, I'm good with not being the closer. I trust this guy implicitly. It'll be the status day of my career when Middleton retires. And if he wants the ball, he gets the ball. We were talking about humility and awareness. And I ask you this question. If he had said the same thing down 3-1,
Crush him.
if he had said the same thing down at all, if he had said the same thing after a loss, it would have been viewed as meek. It would have been viewed as doesn't have the stomach for any of this. It would have been sort of a stain that would have been hard to remove in terms of public trust. Is that athlete afraid of things?
You're right, but what Giannis is saying is accurate, and anyone can see that. In the final 5 minutes, Middleton has a skill set that helps him close games in a way that Giannis just doesn't have. The problem in the past It was Giannis trying to close those games. Chris is right. He couldn't do it. Middleton is doing it now.
Well, can you make contested jumpers is the thing that you need at the end of games. And can he make jumpers at all is something that you ask about Giannis. I just think that the thing that becomes difficult in the analysis that allows you to drag and smear a Chris Paul is just height related. It's not excellence related, because you absolutely trust Chris Paul with all manner of mid-range jumpers and jumpers in general, and you trust him also to create offense, but there have just been very few players in the history of the game that get to be that size. And you have
Isaiah Thomas did it.
Yeah, I know there are a few, but there just haven't been many who get to be that size and get to be a dominant type closer, because it's very difficult in the size of that league.
But you're asking yesterday about Giannis's comments. What's the downside in it? The downside is your vulnerability, right? It's your basically willingness to accept criticism when those words are used against you. And Giannis has clearly decided that he's okay with that level of honesty.
And I love him for it. I really do. And I'm rooting for him to win the championship for a number of different reasons, but that is one of them. I want excellence rewarded, Stugotz. And I've grown weary at 52 years old of how we denigrate these people who are top 1% of the top 1% who have ever done this. And we smear them with all sorts of things instead of admiring the artistry of their excellence.
I haven't.
And you never will. I understand that. Roger Bennett going to join us in a moment, but Whittingham, you were calling a knee-jerk of the moment, prisoner of the moment, but you were calling yesterday the most delightful day in the history of football.
Yeah, of the world's biggest sport. Yes, I thought that yesterday was the greatest day of tournament football that we've ever seen. Now, I mean, Champions Leagues have produced great moments. No, but I mean, we have two games on in the same day, 2 3-1 comebacks. A combined 14 goals in 2 games. We had a penalty shootout in which one of the world's greatest players missed the decisive penalty to knock the tournament favorites out of the tournament. You had Spain conceding a 3-1 lead and then winning it 5-3 in extra time. I tweeted this. Every group chat in soccer yesterday had 15 holy shit moments, from the saves from the goalkeeper, from the incredible goals, from cutaways in the crowd. It was one of the greatest days of soccer, and I experienced it with a stranger at a bar in Benihana.
Is that the first time a team has come back from a 3-1 deficit in the history of soccer? I know it happened twice, but just because 3-1 is usually game over.
No.
I mean, that's
come on, Stugotz.
Yeah.
It's a 2-goal lead.
Why do you insist on sticking your beak in the soccer conversations when your only take is some form of grand ignorance?
You agree if a soccer game is 3-1, you're turning that game off. It's over, Dan. You're agree with that.
You're never turning any of these games on. You're just a public soccer hater.
Who sits at the bar at Benihana?
It's weird.
It was where I wanted to have lunch yesterday, so I sat down at the bar, and a stranger walked in, and he was FaceTiming with a friend. He's like, "Hey, look, this game is on," and it was one of those cool things where it's a great sports moment. No one else in the place knows what's going on, but you meet someone and you go, "We're experiencing this thing together." Didn't say a word to him. It was eyebrows and eye contact. It was incredible. I feel like I'm best friends with this guy now.
You don't even know if that person speaks the same language that you do, right?
I actually think, because Roger Bennett is now in the Zoom, I think this is how he and Michael Davies met. They were at a wedding together, and it was eyebrows and eye contact over a World Cup final, I believe.
The new
that is the story. I was working as a chef at Benihana, and in he came, looking for love in all the wrong places, and so Men in Blazers was born. It's a joy to be with you.
Reborn in the USA, an Englishman's love letter to his chosen home. It comes out today. You know the Men in Blazers show. If you know soccer, it's available on Peacock. So I don't know how much of what Whittingham was saying you heard there, Roger, but he is proclaiming it one of the most delightful days in the history of your grand sport yesterday.
Because it was the day before my book came out. That's really very, very generous of him. And I would probably agree, in all sincerity, the football yesterday was, we've all been stuck in quarantine. I would venture to bet that no one has emerged from quarantine drunker than Euro 2020. It is absolutely, it's like a Christopher Nolan movie. It's totally and utterly bonkers. No one can quite understand what the heck's going on, but you can't take your eyes off it for a second. It's delirious. It's like It's like the Golden State Warriors collapsing from 3-1 up over and over and over and over again. It's magic.
And so what were the most interesting parts of what it is that you saw yesterday before we get into your book, your love of country, your patriotism, your enthusiasm?
Well, you know, I'm an American now. You know that, Dan. I'm like, love America more than Kenny Powers loves America. But the tiny little bit of Englishness that's still in me, it does enjoy watching France crap the bed. Gotta say, that never gets tiring. So that was pretty unbelievable watching them fight back from 1-0 down, go to 3-1. The game is over. We march on, not so fast, friendo. It was magnificent watching them crap the bed. Never get tired of that. And ultimately, well, number one, the baseline is this tournament was cancelled last year. A pandemic ravaged Europe and we could not watch it. We have had to wait a year. So just to see fans back in the stadia, the fact that this tournament can happen at all, humanly, is joyous, remarkable, delirious. We will never take this for granted again. These footballers are exhausted, like many athletes. We're watching the NBA, head towards the finals with these teams barely holding on. Limbs are popping all over the place. So it is with football. These athletes have worked through a COVID pandemic schedule, which has shattered them to the bone. But you watch them pull on their national team jerseys. You watch these guys, how much it means to them, how much it meant to the Swiss yesterday not a celebrity packed team, to defang a glorious French team. You watch, Croatia, a tiny country, population the size of Oklahoma. Look at a sports superpower, Spain, and they didn't win, but they fancied their chances and they came bloody close. And of course, the Denmark thing, Christian Eriksen, we almost lost him with the world watching in a dark, dark day and watching that team recover. They were zombies when they played their first game. They lost their second game, and then tenaciously they've willed themselves back to watch them now become a team of destiny. It's the greatest human theater.
Is there any country the world loves watching lose more than France, and why is the answer no?
Such a great question, such a deep and remarkable question, and a reminder, one of the joys of international football. I love American football. The Chicago Bears saved my life many, many times. Hard to believe because they're such a crap team, but my God, when they went on that Super Bowl run, that saved my life and gave me life. But when these international teams take the field in European competition or World Cup competition, their nation's histories take the field alongside them. And that's what makes it so deep, because let's just say Germany are playing England this afternoon. There's quite a lot of history there, Dan. And that's really what we're reveling into. The France thing is hilarious. But again, it's like the French history, the emergence from small France to a very arrogant, swaggering, petty France, to a France who believes it can win both on the field and dominate in Europe. The mirror, ultimately, football, soccer, international football is just a reflection of the societies and the culture that surrounds it, and that's what makes it so rich and deep and remarkable.
You mentioned Eriksen, and we were talking. I was interested in your thoughts on this when it came out. What is the broadcast's responsibility in that situation? People were made so squeamish by much of it, nothing more so than the combination of thinking that a player was dying on the field combined with the video of his wife being scared. So what is the broadcast's responsibility there?
You're asking me, a bald buffoon, a very deep and remarkable question. I'll say, first of all, ESPN do not call the shots on that international feed. This is not an ESPN question. They get what they're given by a match director in Europe. And look, this was such an unprecedented reality. If you don't remember the story, American listeners, this is the creative heart of the Danish team. He's been on our show. Christian Eriksen, a sweet and wonderful, just a force for good, a prime athlete. In the first half of the first game, away from the ball, just collapsed on the field and was down. And we now know, because the Swiss doctor said, we lost him on that field. He had a heart challenge, which he was ended, and the fibrillators revived him. And thank God he's doing fantastically now. Normally the norm is there's a player down, you zoom in, you see it's normally a bad leg or better than I do. Missy in football, it's nothing. It's a magic recovery is coming. And I think the depth of, what we did with Christian Eriksen, we together, the world glimpse, we go to sports. Dan, your show is built on this. Your enterprise is built on this as a release to get away from the darkness of life, to lift our spirits for joy, for connectivity, for moments of wonder. And instead, with the world watching, we glimpse the darkness. We glimpse the void. We glimpse the reminder we are all going to die, which we are. But that's not what we go to sports for. And I imagine now that will be a lesson learned, because there's been no precedent really. Once or twice, there's been situations like a football's equivalent of a Len Bias situation. But I think the lingering, you do witness now when a player's down, bloody hell. Even when it's just a little tweet, they snap away bloody quickly, because we have glimpsed the worst now, and they will not do that again.
Roger, I want to ask you, now we'll get to your book and how you feel a renewed sense of Americanness, but I want to briefly harp on your English mentality as an England supporter. Perhaps once upon a time, there's still a little bit of it left. You look at that side of the bracket. Germany is really the only obstacle in the way of you and a Wembley final for the English national team at a Euros. Okay, if you look at just sort of before the tournament, these are the two favorites on this side. Do you think that they can finally overcome the massive disappointments that have been England at a major tournament and actually live up to their potential, win a home game against Germany on their way?
Chris Whittingham is Lucy holding the ball for me to run at and kick. I want to be completely clear before I give you a serious answer to that. Listeners, I support America. I am more American than Kenny Powers, Kid Rock. I'm about as American as Bruce Springsteen. I would never deem to be more anything than the boss. So when England play America, oh my God, I am rooting for one team and one team only. And when Alex Morgan sips tea after scoring against the English in the Women's World Cup, I am like, that is a great moment in American history, up there with the Battle of Yorktown and when we sent Piers Morgan back. But so I just want to make that absolutely clear. But you're asking me about England, and above my head, and I don't know if I can't swear on this show.
Yes, let it fly.
Okay. I'm going to test this now. I'm so excited. There's a book which documents the history of English football since 1966 when we won the World Cup. And it's called 40 Years of Shite. It's a serious history of and so there's just a cycle. I've said this before. The English national team are essentially the New York Knicks. It's always, this is going to be our year. We've learned our lessons. We've got the chemistry. We got the big names. Let's do this. And, there's this hilarious song they sing. It's coming home. It's coming home. Football's coming home. It's coming home. And they say it almost ironically at this point. We know it's not coming home. You're making me, Lucy, you're making me run at that football because you've seen it's the easy side of the bracket. This is the weakest German team of all time. But my whole life can be measured out in Germany, facing England, and feeling only dismal, haunting, disastrous pain. They do us every bloody time. And by the way, even if we do beat them this afternoon, please don't let it go to penalties, because my heart will not be able to bear it. Even if we do beat them, and the nation of England will turn the hype up to 11, we'll crap the bed somewhere down the road. That's how life ends. Jessica, hello.
When are you going to curse?
When I said Piers Morgan, is that not good enough for you?
You say you're not an England fan, but you just used the royal we.
Yes, you did. Yes, we caught you. We caught you, Bennett. You're trying to play. This is what you're trying to do. You're trying to sell Reborn in the USA, an Englishman's love letter to his chosen home. It comes out today, and you want the Americans to love you, and you're traitorous to your we, your beloved we.
Yeah, that's bullshit, is the honest truth. We do every night after the Euros, we do this Spotify green room where we break down and I find the heart. I catch myself when I watch an England game. It's good for England doing well is good for business. Like the Premier League, we know the stars. Americans like to watch the English national team. So we do talk a lot about England, and it annoys the hell out of me. And I constantly, it's become a running joke. I'm constantly being like, yeah, you know, we're a bit crap at the back. Oh, not we, they. I'm trying to be objective like a big journalist. It is the last litany of that youth. And I mean, to talk about the book for a second, in that context, I consider myself, like, my identity is 100% American. And the book documents that. My kids, I have 4 kids. And it shocked me the first time one of them wrote a book report at school, and they have to do that kind of fake book biography on the back when he was like 5 or 6, Samson, my oldest son. And he wrote, Samson Bennett is a British American. And I looked at it, I was gobsmacked. I was like, what are you doing? I didn't say that, but I was like, oh my God. I didn't encourage that identity. That's not who I am. I don't see myself as that. I have stood in a courtroom in Lower Manhattan with 162 other human beings who have, you know, my book is about surviving Liverpool in the 1980s, a magnificent city that was on its knees at the time, economically, culturally, politically. It was a dark place of unemployment, a heroin epidemic. It was like Train Spotting with English accents. And I survived by just inhaling everything American that I could, from like Miami Vice, Heart to Heart, The Love Boat, the Beastie Boys, Run DMC, the Chicago Bears when the NFL started to be broadcast on English television. Oh my God, I could talk about that moment for a long time. But like, America seemed to be this place where life could be lived with things I didn't know. It could be joy, optimism, hope, aspiration. And when you stood in a courtroom with these human beings, 162 from 47 countries, and you say the oath of allegiance, and you look left and right, and you see people who have survived civil wars, they have crawled through deserts, they have gone on devastating journeys to be in this place, driven by an idea of America, which is courageous and joyous and deeply, deeply meaningful. I consider myself utterly American. That's all I want. But it is hilarious. To answer your question, the we thing, it annoys the hell out of me, and I can't stop doing it.
Well, as a former Brit, I know you were happy to see France lose yesterday, but I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about Kareem Benzema, because he's been gone from the French team for 6 years. I wonder if you could talk to the audience about what is going on with him.
Well, your audience, essentially, they know Benzema as the man who allegedly blackmailed a teammate with sex vids and so got kicked out of the team. And he's an elite striker. You know, it's a bit like having an elite running back. You know, running backs used to be, when I watched football as a kid in the 80s, just the prime player on the team, watching Walter Payton run behind always a terrible offensive line, but just, my God, an incredible human being. Everybody wanted to be a running back. Now, of course, everybody wants to be a wide receiver. And the game of football has changed, and everybody wants to be a wing back. They all want to run up and down the flank and dazzle. And that's what the great players who can dictate play and enforce their idea on the game. And so the striker, there's actually fewer elite strikers in the game than ever. England have a remarkable human being, Harry Kane, who's under a lot of scrutiny now. Belgium have just an incredible human being, a truly noble poet, warrior, Romelu Lukaku. And France recalled this gentleman after 6 years in exile for this alleged sex vid bribery thing. He is an elite bloody striker. They are out, so we shouldn't be talking about them anymore. But my God, even in defeat, he scored. Well, first of all, the Swiss team were 1-0 up. They had a penalty, and he iced the kicker by with real, what you call in football, shithousery. He just iced the kicker. They missed the penalty, and they went up the other end. Benzema scored a goal, which was like watching Baryshnikov, that first touch. It's on my Twitter. Watch it, even if you don't like football. My God, it made the world's nipples tingle. And then scored 90 seconds later. So within 2 minutes 19, he completely changed the game. Sex vids. That is essentially the Benzema story, and now he's gone. I will answer all football questions. I do want to talk about my book because ultimately Independence Day is coming. I love America. I wrote a love letter to America, and it really feels like this nation could do with one right now.
Guillermo, put it on the poll, please. Did it make the world's nipples tingle? And also, can you elaborate on shithousery?
Shithousery.
Sorry, in America. See, that's like me saying we for England when I say shithousery. Should I be saying Stugotz shithousery?
I just never have heard the expression before.
Shithousery. It's the dark arts. It's just the intangibles. It's just like Dennis Rodman was the master of shithousery. If you've watched the oeuvre of D. Rodman, then my friend, without knowing it, you have been exposed to a ton of shithousery.
Reborn in the USA, an Englishman's love letter to his chosen home. It comes out today, and you're welcome to talk about the book, but I feel like you already have very gloriously talked about the book.
I feel like I haven't. I'd like to read the whole book. It's a couple. I like to read it from start to finish. As a book on tape.
Do you have you have it near you? Let's go ahead. Go ahead and read us a passage that you particularly like. Go ahead. I would like to do that with you.
I will. What I'd say is the Chicago Bears Super Bowl team. I'm in England. Football in the 80s was just violent. You went there because you liked the taste of your own blood in your mouth. I'd go with my dad and you'd routinely step over broken bodies, be like, oh, help me, help me. People like, oh, he's just been beaten up, no biggie. And so it was a hooligan culture. And then the NFL started to be broadcast in the 1980s, 1982 on English television on a cult channel that was rarely watched. It was an hour-long show where they crunched. In those days, it was just 14 games a week. They crunched all the highlights from the previous week's games into an hour, mostly to montages of Bonnie Tyler holding out for a hero. It would be like amazing. It would be like, Danny White, let's go. And you'd be like, oh my God. And you'd watch like Bum Phillips. You'd be like, oh my God, there's a man called Bum and his team are crap. And instead of like doing what you should do, the New Orleans Saints, where the fans should have risen up and beat the crap out of the Atlanta Falcons fans. That's what you do when your team loses. But no, the New Orleans Saints were like, we're the New Orleans Saints. Let's put bags over our heads. Let's laugh. Let's drink light beer. Let's eat sausage-based products and just have a great time anyway. And I watched that and I was like blown away. Just like, my God, you can have fun at sports games. That is insane. And then the Chicago Bears, Walter Payton, frittering away that man's career. And then right at the end of his career, just building a fearsome, swaggering I think I was the only English person that owned a copy of the Super Bowl Shuffle. I had its special order sent out to me. And what I want to tell you is, watching that as a kid, 14-year-old Rog in Liverpool, watching, I mean, my favorite New England Patriots quarterback of all time, Tony Eason, watching him get pulverized in the Super Bowl and meeting William Perry shortly afterwards, who whispered in my ear, have big dreams, kids. I can do it. I did it. You can do it too. And I was like, oh my God, he's speaking to me. He's telling me to move to America. That team shucking its 20 years of self-sabotage and ridiculousness to become a swaggering, powerful, omnipotent team. To young me, that's like, my history is pathetic. I'm a loser. I too can rise up and just be like Jim McMahon and really be proactive in life. So each of these American things ultimately spoke to me and told me, and don't even get me started on Don Johnson and Miami Vice, but all of those things just like spoke to me and taught me important lessons about life that have ended up. I mean, I grew up, and I can show you a little photo in my book. I had the Statue of Liberty and the Manhattan skyline painted on one wall. It was a terrible painting. The Statue of Liberty, they forgot she had an arm, so they kind of just had to jam it in. But every night, I would arrange my curtains so the light cracked onto her face, so she was the last thing I saw. And to live there now, to live here now in that very crude representation of Manhattan as an adult and have a family, in all sincerity, it's a journey of a lifetime. To be an American is something I don't take for granted. And it's just not just an honor to be in your show, but an honor that America would have me.
What an odd passage to read.
It wasn't, it wasn't.
That's the whole book.
Yeah,
I read the whole book.
Yes. What's great about America, Steve McMichael. Okay, very good, Roger. Thank you for being on with us. We appreciate the
Richard
time.
Dent.
Oh, mate, what? Don't not Richard Dent. You know, if I was in studio, Stugotz, you would not be mocking Richard Dent to my face. You understand? I would swagger into your studio with Matt Suey behind me, and we would cause havoc. Let me tell you, friend.
Thank you for being on with us.
Gary
The
Fensick.
perfect punctuation right there.
One of the great investor hedge funds / defensive backs of all time.
We're not going to do better than Matsui. Let's just end on. You're not going to come up with a better name from that team than Matsui.
He's the Lou Longley of the Chicago Bears.
Thank you for being on with us, Roger. We
Thank you for
appreciate
having
it.
me. We love what you're doing. Courage, guys.
Likewise.
Thank you,
America.
Roger.
Here's one for you, Stugotz, from Anthony Slater. Chris Paul has missed 41 of his 60 shots against the Clippers. The Suns have an offensive rating of 97.7 with him on the floor this series and a 112.5 rating with him off it. The Clippers, without Kawhi Leonard, are okay as a basketball team, but this is one of those places where coaches of the year need to do some math on how healthy one of their key guys is. And it's next to impossible. This is one of those spots, right? To do anything other than go with Chris Paul until ride it till the very end.
Oh, you have to at this point. I mean, I think Monty Williams probably views Chris Paul as the reason they're in the position that they're in.
I remind you that it wasn't but last week that you were saying that the easy call is get Ben Simmons the hell off the court. And this was last week that you were doing this.
Right, because he can't shoot. And I realize that Chris Paul is not shooting well, but he can shoot, Dan. He can hit twos. He can hit threes if he gets hot.
Healthy Chris Paul can, and I still trust him with mid-range jumpers. But again, he's missed 41 of his 60 shots. And it would appear, right? We can, and we'll get a mean in here in a second, because I am not advocating for the benching of Chris Paul. I'm just saying, like I did last week, that you ride with the guys who are your best guys. And look, man, the Nets were doing it with Harden, and Harden couldn't get around anybody in that series. I'm simply pointing out to you that the numbers are not very good on Chris Paul, and this becomes difficult math because Devin Booker, since Stugotz, he is not as accurate. Devin Booker with that mask, that is a difficult thing to play with when you are a shooter and when comfort matters, when rhythm matters. And, we've seen those guys throw those masks off. And that sometimes, to guys, when we're talking, it's always amazing to me that the difference in legacies and how we view someone like Giannis is something like a shoe size. And these teams are not healthy in the Western Conference. These teams are not what they have been all season at their best when they are healthy. And you start changing the math, right? Because you are someone who has been very critical of Chris Paul over the years. And you will find a way, even if they advance to the finals, even if they win the title, you will find a way to criticize Chris Paul and say, well, you didn't do it as the number one, Chris Paul. Devin Booker is the number one.
Yeah, and Ayton's the two. I probably will do that.
Ayton was useless last night.
He was, yeah. But so was Chris Paul, kind of, right? I mean, they're 2-0 without Chris Paul in this series. They're 1-2 with Chris Paul in this series. It's like, I don't know. I have a lot to do here with Chris Paul.
It's a bit of a pretzel,
yes,
and
a lot on the line here. I mean,
and we will bring in our expert Amin El Hassan in a second to give us some insight on all of these things.
Now, one of the things I feel like is kind of being under-discussed is he tested positive for COVID. Now, he's vaccinated, so I can't imagine it's affecting him physically, but you talk all the time about when players jump aboard the moving train that is the playoffs. Getting off and getting back on must be really hard, and I feel like just generally, like, because COVID has been in our lives for so long, like, the College World Series had a team that had to back out because they had positive tests and there were people in contact tracing. And there were pitchers playing in the field, right? Completely bastardized the College World Series. Yesterday, Croatia went out of the Euros. One of their best players has COVID and missed the game. And we're just like, all right, carry on. He had COVID. Like, and it's one of those things where you can't stop the world every time that something COVID related happens. But Chris Paul missed part of this series because of COVID and is trying to get back on this moving trade after having had COVID.
Are you saying that Cameron Payne is perhaps the better option here, the better CP? I think you are.
I am not saying
that. He
was
17 of 34 in the first two games, Dan. They were 2-0.
I am not saying that. I am just saying that this Suns team that was great all season is clearly, with those two players, some fraction of at their best, depleted in a way that allows Paul George to go in there and beat them when he's on the road with Kawhi Leonard. I am not willing to do the things that you do and get out there with the take that they should bench Chris Paul. I just find
great take.
I just find those decisions hard to make for coaches. You, as last week, were saying it was so easy to bench Ben Simmons and you don't have to be consistent about anything. I want to instead just marvel. I believe that one of my greatest, I agree with myself on this, one of my greatest basketball takes is that the merging of Marcus Morris and Markieff Morris, if I take the two of them and merge them, I have created the symbol for an average NBA starter that is the best representation of the average NBA starter. And I mean this as no disparagement on the average. To be an average NBA starter is to be great at basketball, just not as great as the people who are above average and just a little bit better than the people who are below average. That if you merge the brothers, the two of them, and Marcus Morris was great last night.
Oh, he was tremendous. 22 points. They needed those 22 points last night, but he can give you 2 the next night. That's what he does.
I do love when desperation is something in sports at this level that you can see physically manifested in a way that was obvious. The way that the Clippers were going after the ball, the aggressive way that they were playing. Now, all of it changes if Paul George misses 15 of 20 jumpers instead of makes 15 of 20 jumpers. And many of them were contested. And he was great last night. But the Clippers were desperate in a way that was obvious caring, right? For all of you who like to form the arguments on, I prefer the college game, it's pure, they try harder. There was no absence of trying from the Clippers last night. They were in a building, and when Phoenix came back and cut it to 4, Stugotz.
Yeah.
They cut it to 4, and you've got no Kawhi Leonard out there. That would have been an easy time for the Clippers to fold it up because that place was Phoenix was feeling a spirit there that they haven't felt in a really long time.
There is nothing, you're right, like watching a desperate DeMarcus Cousins. I mean, where did he come from?
I prefer desperation when it comes from clear and obvious champions. When you see those desperate Warriors be down or those desperate Heat teams be down against Derrick Rose's Bulls, when it's that kind of obvious, when greatness is desperate, but the 45-win Clippers, which is about what I imagine they would be without Kawhi Leonard, they were clearly and physically and obviously desperate in that game in a way that was fun to watch. I wanted to, before Amin gets here, I did want to ask you about another thing that made an appearance last night. And I don't know how Billy feels about this. I've called this person a blight upon our people, which is not usually a cruelty that I hit people with in sports, but thy name is Angel Hernandez, and you're infuriating, Angel. You're infuriating umpire.
What do you do now?
I mean, he was just Angel Hernandez last night in a way that enrages anyone, and we should all have a union to protect us when we're as bad as our job as he is. Like, I have wanted, during everything that's happened, during the fiasco that is baseball these days of checking pitchers, for a pitcher to like check Angel Hernandez's eyes when he is being checked as a retaliatory measure.
Pretty hard to do.
An eye chart, like pull out something, a little light that looks into his eyes, because it's when he's a home plate umpire that it's the most infuriating. Just nobody who's this bad at their job gets to keep it this long. And David Sampson corrected me on something the other day. The baseball union actually lost in the last round, the baseball union, but the umpires union, man, they stay strong and among the strongest unions in the history of unions because Angel Hernandez remains employed.
You gotta feel kind of bad for Angel, though, right? Like, when he got into the game, did you think that he thought that robots were going to be coming for his job and breathing down his neck? Like, everything this guy does now, we have little screens and computers and robots telling you, hey, you're horrible at your job, right? That has to get in your head. If you have people nonstop telling you, you are bad at this, you are one of the worst at this out there, you are historically awful at your job, that has to get in your head, right? Angel has to be looking and thinking, you know what? What's the robot going to say? Let me get this right. And then he makes the wrong call. And then I think we may be to the point, and I don't want to speak for Angel. I don't know him. He seems like a lovely man. Actually, I don't know that to be the case. But you see Angel and you have to think, you know what? I'm going to show these robots that I'm going to call whatever the hell I want, whether it's right or not. And the robots can come for my job, but they're not going to get it because I'm Angel goddamn Hernandez. And that may be what's at play now too, don't you think?
Well, you say this about him, but I do believe he's delusional. He's claimed that he doesn't get chief assignments, not because he's bad, but because racism.
It is insane that umpires are still calling balls and strikes when we can see on my TV the right answer. I mean, in all of sports,
Nah, come on.
it's
I
insane.
don't know.
It's part of the charm. I mean,
If
Yeah,
I'm
we're
if
trusting the graphics too.
I'm on
to
my
be in the right
couch.
spot.
I'm on my couch eating Doritos, and I'm like, oh, that was a ball. And the umpire in the game is calling it a strike.
And we've only been able to see it for a decade.
It's insane. Prediction in the next 2 or 3 years, they have to change it, right? It's just stupid.
Not with that union. Not with that union.
No.
Not that
The
union.
umpire can still stand there. You can still get paid. Just you don't make that decision.
that sounds like my kind of job.
I mean,
The strike zone's also, by the way, up to the umpire. You know, there's suggestions, knees to chest, here's home plate, but up to the umpire. You know, as long as he's consistent, we're good.
Amin El Hassan, let's give him his customary music here and give the people some good basketball talk as opposed to what it is that we do around here.
Time to talk basketball. Amino's basketball. He'll teach you basketball. Expert in basketball.
I mean, Chris Paul and Devin Booker, how wounded are both of them? This is not the Suns team. I mean, I know they lost one game last night, but Chris Paul statistically hasn't been very good, and everybody was scoring on Booker last night.
Yeah, I mean, Booker is not exactly a defensive stalwart. He's a guy who's a much improved defender. I've said this before on the show, that he's gone from a negative defender to a positive defender, someone who does not detract from his presence out there. Having said that, he's not guarding Paul George and locking him up like that. He might get a couple of good possessions here and there, but the reality is he's a guy that has to work within a scheme. Chris Paul is the bigger concern here, Dan, because you talk about what he went through, first of all, with the shoulder thing, and now coming out of a COVID protocol. We don't know what his physical state is, so I don't want to make excuses for him, but yeah, last night was not encouraging.
I mean, earlier Dan suggested that the Suns start Cameron Payne. Do you agree with him? He did. I mean, he'll deny it, but he did. He kind of did.
Shout out to Cameron Payne. This dude was in China a year ago, and now he's in the Western Conference Finals. And radio hosts are saying, you know what, he should be starting over Hall of Famer Chris Paul. That is quite the turnaround in just about 12 months.
41 of his 60 shots he's missed against the Clippers. Chris Paul has 97.7 offensive rating with him on the floor this series, 112.5 rating with him off it. Stugotz was saying last week that it should have been easy for Doc Rivers to simply bench Ben Simmons. And what I was saying is how difficult these decisions are for coaches because none of them make the decision to sit down the injured guy. James Harden just played, and you saw that he couldn't get around anybody.
Why am I staring at Chris Cody's crotch?
I don't know.
question.
That seems like a you
It is.
problem. I don't know. I don't know why it is that you were doing that. Did you hear anything I said, or were you just distracted by Chris Cody's?
That's my life.
The decision is difficult for a couple of reasons. One is that you have an expectation and a trust in your star to get it right when it most needs to be got right. With Chris Paul, you know he's the smartest guy on the floor. You know everybody on the floor is saying, I'm so much better of a basketball player this year because I got to play with this guy. So down the stretch, you're going to trust him to do those things, to make the right decision, to make everybody better. The other part of it, and this is the part that people like Stugotz never get, is, okay, go ahead and bench Ben Simmons. Let's see how that works out for your career. Like, you guys think that like this is like college. I can just bench the guy and I try to show him, teach him a lesson. No, man, there are relationships here that you have to continue to cultivate and manage. And yes, these guys have egos. And yes, they'll be embarrassed if you sit them in the fourth quarter of a playoff game, of a game 7, and just say, yeah, I was trying to win. And especially, it's one thing if you win and you bench the guy. You still have to manage that situation. But if you lose, he had Ben Simmons on the bench in the game 7 in the fourth quarter. You're done. You're done, son.
Isn't the coach's job to give his team the best chance at winning basketball games? Meaning, if Cameron Payne indeed is the healthier player right now,
You want to make the take. You want to, and you're not brave enough
do.
to make it. You're pinning it on
do
me.
It right now. I'm going to do it right now. They are 2-0 with Cameron Payne starting in this series. They're 1-2 when Chris Paul starts. Cameron Payne shooting 50% from the field. he's played better in this series. Perhaps because I'm not saying he's a better basketball player. I'm saying he's a healthier basketball player. Perhaps should Monty Williams maybe consider starting Cameron Payne? I would. That's the coach's job.
I think that this series is like Stugotz's dream. Chris Paul versus Paul George. Someone is going to fail, and it's going to be his fault for the series ending not the way they wanted to. And Stugotz wins. Stugotz is the only winner in the Western Conference Finals.
What do you make of Chris Whittingham's suggestion, and he agrees with himself on this, that Giannis is a number 2?
Oh, I was so angry with you. You're usually the man of like measure and kind of really thoughtful takes, and you come out with one of the hottest takes ever. Look, Chris Middleton, you try making Chris Middleton your number 1 and see how many games you win for a season.
They're
the
doing it
reality
now.
is this. No. No. They're not. They're not, because the reality is this. We focus on the last like 7 minutes of a game and who did it, and that's our number 1. What about the first 41 minutes? What about the first 70 games? Who's the workhorse? Who's bringing it every night? Who night in, night out, we can count on for 29, 30 points, 10 rebounds, 57% from the field, night in, night out. That's your number 1. And then a guy who hops off your back and then does the little stuff at the end, which is useful, which is absolutely necessary, and which is symbiotic with your number 1. That's your closer, but he's not your number 1. In the same way that Robert Horry wasn't the Spurs' number 1 because he hit a bunch of shots at the end.
I don't accept the premise of that last 7 minutes thing. The last 7 minutes thing is everything in basketball. Like, it just is. Like, if you cannot create your own stuff in the last 7 minutes of games, you cannot be your number 1. I'm sorry.
Witty, we don't get to the last 7 minutes if it's not for the first 41. You're acting like the game started with 7 minutes to go. You got to get there first, and there's a guy who carries you to that point every night. Look, Middleton has some nights like that night, and some nights he just kind of, oh man, I only had 12 points on 5 of 30 shooting tonight. But it's cool. Why is it cool? Because the number 1 is there.
Yes or no, Reggie Jackson, the greatest postseason money grab since Jerome James?
Tim Thomas.
Oh, wow.
Thomas in Phoenix 2006. Because that dude was out of the league. That dude was like persona non grata. He got cut. He got straight up cut. He goes to Phoenix on a minimum. He balls out, and he gets $24 million. I'll tell you the story real quick. So he gets with Phoenix midseason. The Suns go on this conference finals run. He hits big shots in playoff games. At the end of it, after the Suns get eliminated, he says, I'd be an idiot not to come back here. This is the perfect system. I've searched entire life for a coach like Mike D'Antoni in a system like this to play in, right? Everyone's feeling real confident. July 1, 12:01, Suns get a call from his agent. He says, the Clippers just offered $24 million over 4 years. You have 30 minutes to match. I waited my whole life to play in this place. Also, you have 30 minutes to match this deal.
What's Reggie Jackson going to get next season?
Oh, I think he'll get mid-level. He'll get a nice little $9-10 million range per year thing, because he's not a point guard. Nothing that he's doing in these playoffs that are very impressive are of the point guard variety. They are all, I go out and get buckets, meaning he's really a backup guard. He's like Lou Williams and Jamal Crawford and guys like that. You come in off the bench, you come in and get buckets. I think Reggie Jackson's going to get himself a nice 8-figure deal over like 2 or 3 years.
I like to update the modern reference on Jerome James. I think it's Bismack Biyombo, because that was in the post-salary cap bump when everyone had money, and he got $64 million from Orlando when they already had bigs. $64 million for Bismack Biyombo.
Amin gave you Tim Thomas because he was in that front office that got fooled.
Well, no, we didn't get fooled. We didn't pay him. We didn't pay him. The Clippers paid him.
Oh, but you were ready to pay him. You were ready to pay him.
Not $24 million. You know who I work for? $24 million? Oh, man. No, sir.
Give me the best you got on Lillard.
Well, I think, first of all, a lot of people are kind of conflating the issues about the coach, and that's why he's going to leave. You know, if Lillard is going to leave, it's because he's not happy with the overall job the front office has done in the last 4 or 5 years, basically, since he's been an elite player. It's not because you didn't hire the coach I wanted or you hired the coach I literally didn't want. It's because it's an overall picture thing. And I think for Lillard, he's coming to the realization that then, I heard you talk about it yesterday, that every star goes through at some point, how much of my prime am I going to trust these people to keep not getting me the help that I need? And so no one wants a super team, or no one wants to be the guy who joins a super team. But the reality is you're saying, okay, I'm just going to trust these guys to get it right. How long do you wait?
What'd you make of Pippen yesterday on Dan Patrick?
Look, I know Scotty from having worked with him at the jump. Scotty's a guy that sometimes when he's being interviewed, not like when he's, even on the jump, I think he just says what's on his mind at that moment. And he'll go down that path as far as it goes. Because I remember there was a season where he said, Jordan's the GOAT, no question. LeBron could never come close. And then like a few months later, LeBron's the GOAT. He's better than Jordan. He's the best player I've ever seen. And this was in the same season. So I've always gotten a feeling that Scotty's like, today, I feel like Jordan's the GOAT. Tomorrow, I might feel like LeBron's the GOAT. And everything he says is kind of wishy-washy in that way.
That's fine if you're Stugotz. You don't have to keep track of anything. But when you're constantly making headlines for the things that you say, and you're saying what's on his mind that day, what was on his mind on Dan Patrick was Phil Jackson's a racist. Like you're not hearing a whole lot of that. Not this day, not yesterday, not the next day.
We've heard that about Phil Jackson being a racist before when he referred to LeBron and Maverick Carter and Rich Paul as LeBron's posse, right? And we went after him then. I don't know Phil Jackson. Maybe he was like one of those people like from Get Out, where he seems like a very nice, friendly, I would have voted for Obama 3 times if I had the chance. But behind closed doors, he says things that are kind of closeted racist or thinly veiled racism. I don't know. All I know is that Scotty might have said that yesterday, and next week he'll say Phil Jackson was one of the kindest men I've ever played.
Okay.
I don't know.
And yet he said nothing to us.
Okay. And the only thing that's consistent is that when he comes on with us, he doesn't say anything, any of those things. I mean, where can people find you? Is there another place that people can find you other than right here?
Is there another place, he asks? Of course there is. It's called Cinephobe, the podcast where Zach Harper and I review movies that are poorly rated on Rotten Tomatoes and try to ascertain whether they are accurately poorly rated or maybe they didn't get a fair shake. Cinephobe, wherever you get podcasts. This week, it's the last week of Superhero Month. We did a dealer's choice. We gave it up to the fans. We said, here are 4 movies you can pick from. Fantastic Four, any version. Meteor Man, something else I don't remember now. And Blank Man. Blank Man's the movie we did. We did Blank Man starring Damon Wayans and David Alan Grier. Classic.
Next month, John Travolta month. Very exciting.
Oh,
Has there been a release on what the movie, the 4? You've got so many to choose from.
Tomorrow around 7 a.m., we'll get a little bit of news from my press secretary, Anthony Mace, who's also the producer of Cinephobe. And he'll let us know what the first selection of John Travolta month is. I told Michelle, Sasha, and Malia, sit back, relax. We're going to have a hell of a month.